My husband and I met on the BYU, the Brigham Young University track and field team many years ago. How long ago was that?
Almost 17 and a half years.
Oh, 17 years ago. So we had thrown shot put, discus, and hammer in the past. And when we finished track and field, we kind of hung up that part of our lives, knowing that we would never go to the park and throw discuses back and forth to each other or throw hammers next to a playground. It just wasn't something that you naturally do.
Because that would be horrifying.
It could make other parents
But
nervous, right?
we had some, yeah, probably not the best. So we had some friends stop us in church and they said, "Hey, have you guys ever heard of heavy athletics or Scottish games?" And we had no idea what they were talking about. I mean, like most people, we were familiar with the caber toss, which is the big log that you flip over. But other than that, we knew nothing. So that night we went on the computer, researched it, and that's when we found Utah Heavy Athletics. And we signed up for our first games, which I think was just a couple weeks away, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was pretty close.
Oh, so you dove right
So
into it then.
yeah, we just thought, you know what, the best way to do it is just to sign up. And so we just showed up. We didn't have a kilt, any background. I think we had watched some YouTube videos.
Yeah, mostly bad ones.
And which games was it that you were signing up for? Was it the Utah games or was it the pacing games or where were you?
What happens is there are. This was right after the Utah Scottish Festival that year. There are what we call backyard games or little games that are mostly just for the athletes.
Gotcha.
And then there are games that go along with the Scottish Festival that are really well known. This was just one of those backyard games. We didn't have a kilt yet, which you have to have a kilt for the bigger games. And we just went just to go see what happened. It was on a Saturday in a park somewhere in Salt Lake County. Can't remember exactly
Yeah.
where. And we showed up to go throw.
Awesome.
Yeah, so that was our first experience with the games. And we did the whole 9 events, which that's what they require. And by the end of the day, we looked at each other and went, this is cool. We want to keep doing this.
That is cool. Now, I wasn't aware. So is that the case at all games that if a competitor wants to do like if they want to do caber, they also have to do weight over bar and everything else that's offered?
They actually have to do all of the events offered, and you're scored on every event. So it's kind of like a decathlon that's all about throwing.
Interesting.
But for example, there are 9 events, and it's a golf scoring. So if I were to take first in all 9 events, I'd have a score of 9, and that would beat everyone else on the field. So if you don't do an event, you automatically take last, and you probably just lost the day.
I see.
Yeah, so it's not like track and field where you would choose 2 or 3 events that you're really great at. Everyone does all 9 events. And that's why the throwing days are so long, because you usually start around 9 o'clock and then don't finish till about 4 in the afternoon.
You've had
But
it
it
going till
definitely
like
levels
7.
the playing field.
So, how long did it take before you got some kilts?
After that day, that one Saturday, we went and bought some kilts. Went and ordered some kilts because we didn't. You don't just walk down to the store.
Yeah,
We ordered some
if
kilts
only.
and signed up for our next games. Yeah, that'd be nice.
Cool. So,
So yeah, that one happened pretty quickly because it was a lot of fun.
so after you dove right into it, went right to a games. Did you step in and throw anything that day, or were you mostly watching?
Oh no, we threw everything that day.
Yeah, you
Chelsea
got right into
won.
it.
No, you took second that day.
I think I took second and
Overall?
I took first in the novice class.
yeah.
Really?
In the women, well, and that's perhaps the next question. When you show up to a games your first time, you don't have to compete against everybody on the field. There are different classes that allow you to go against other novice throwers, for example.
I see.
Except in one case, usually men are not competing with women. It's different classes with different levels of skill and different size, even.
Yeah, so you only compete with people who are at your level, which is really nice. So usually in a larger games, there would be a novice class, which could be your first, second, third games where you're still figuring everything out, and you would only compete against the other novice throwers. Then as you improve and get better, you would move to a C class, then a B class, and then ultimately an A class depending on how many years you've thrown, how good you are, how well you're doing, which makes it really nice because it continues to support people who may not be as athletically inclined or maybe new to the sport.
Yeah, that's. I'm finding this very attractive. I hadn't really realized. I hadn't really thought of it before, but I know that for a lot of, so like I'm coming to this from the competitive pipe band side of the games,
Mm-hmm.
and I know that for a lot of pipers and drummers, pipe band is attractive because after high school and college, what else can you do if you've been in marching band or in a drum line, etc.? Well, pipe band is a great option. So
Yes.
it's I hadn't even thought of this aspect for the heavy athletics where you two were coming from track and field, and this was a way to kind of continue.
Yeah. And obviously, now that we have been throwing for
6
probably
years, going
six
into
or 7 years, between 6 and 7 years, we both compete in the A class, and we do well in those classes, but it's still fun at every games to see the new novice throwers and to support the C and the B throwers. And that's what I think keeps the sport fresh and new, because we continually have new competitors and new blood out on the field.
Mm. Now, I've committed a classic podcast host error here. I was too excited to start talking to you. I should let you introduce yourselves. Do you want to take turns just saying who you are and maybe where you're from?
Yeah.
Ladies first.
Okay. My name's Chelsea, and we're the Forsythes, and I'm originally from Southern California. And like I said, we met at BYU, and we raised our family for 10 years in South Jordan outside of Salt Lake City. Then we decided we wanted more space and more land, and we moved to a small town called Richfield, Utah, which is right in the middle of Utah. And we built a house on an acre, loved it there. And then actually, I guess we wanted more freedom and more
Space.
more space. And just in the past 2 to 3 months, we sold that house that we built and bought a trailer. And we are now traveling the country with our 6 kids in a fifth wheel. And so right now we are currently on the coast of Texas.
Which is supposed to be warm, and it's not.
Disappointing.
At this day, it's cold.
So for the listener, if with the kind of any delay or sort of audio discrepancies that you might hear, this is the reason why we're speaking to you, but on location, as it were.
Yeah, pretty
Yes.
much. We don't have any wired internet, or we're running off a generator, actually on the beaches of the Gulf of Mexico.
Well, I'm jealous.
Well, and for me, mine's going to be a lot shorter because she already covered most of it. My name is John. I was actually born and raised in Utah and was living in Richfield when I graduated from high school, and then went off to college and found her. And really, that's, other than the fact that I'm a great big guy, which kind of helps with Highland games, that's the most interesting thing about me, is I'm married to her.
So, in the since you started doing Highland games, have you ever taken a year off? Have you ever not gone?
No.
Except for me.
Well,
I've had
2 babies.
2 babies
Yeah.
in the meantime? Okay.
That seems
Yeah,
like
when
a reasonable excuse.
Yeah, it's a pretty good excuse.
Yeah.
Although I say that, and I have both competed probably at
6 months.
6 to 7 months pregnant and 6 weeks after I've had a baby.
And what do you say, Chelsea? Does that make it better or worse? Does it give you a little extra, or does it pull you back a little?
It's definitely harder working with that counterbalance of a big belly, but they couldn't keep me away. I love it. I love the sport too much.
Very
And
cool.
she still competed well in both those instances, by the way. She was ticked off she lost.
So in those years, you're competing at the A level now. Have you started stepping in to help with any of the administrative, organizational stuff as well?
Both of us have, there's a board, the Utah Heavy Athletics Board, that has a president, has all the different things. Both of us have helped out a little bit, not in a big way, because we just haven't. We've still been throwing a lot. For
And we
example,
have 6 children.
and we have 6 kids. We're slackers that way. For example, I'm still one of the chief judges. There's 2 chief judges in that board, and I'm going to be gone for the entire year. So mostly I help, arrange for judges and help if there's a rule dispute. Mostly because of experience and because I'm opinionated, and so I tell people what I think anyway. They might as well make it official.
Also, we always try and show up the day before or early to help set up, and then definitely stay after to help take down. And that's kind of the great thing about this community is we all understand no one's making money doing this. So we're all here to support and do what needs to be done to get the games to happen.
Yeah. So on that note, I'm curious. So like where I'm coming from, the pipe band world, where we've got the Western United States Pipe Band Association and the other associations. Um, what kind of governing bodies are there in this world of heavy athletics? Is it largely in Utah you compete within the Utah sort of chapter, or is there like once you're a champ in Utah, do you go on to a national games once a year, or like how does that kind of play out?
There isn't one governing body, which in some ways is nice and other ways is not. There does tend to be different chapters. For example, ours, UHA runs games in Utah. They've talked about or helped with games in Idaho before. There are other associations like that through the country that will run games just because it's hard to have all the equipment you need to put on an entire games by yourself.
Sure.
And so you'll have a festival that reaches out to UHA, for example, and says, hey, can you come and run a games? And so there's that. There are a couple of big championships, mostly because they started saying it was a championships and then everyone said, okay, that'll be that. There's one up in Enumclaw, Washington, which is like a national championship. And then there's actually 2 different world championships that are put on every year for the amateurs. And one is in Minnesota, right out of St. Paul. And then there's another one that's called the IHGF championships that actually goes over to Europe and competes over there. Both of those were canceled this last year because of stupid COVID. But there are those which are really just organizations stepping up to say, let's have a big championships, and then they organize it and invite the top throwers or who are supposed to be the top throwers, and they put on a competition with all of them.
I see.
And as well as what John has said, there is also a national database, which is called NASGA, NASGA, North American Scottish Games Association. I think that's what it is. But what happens is after you compete at a games, whoever was running the games will enter all of your throws into this national database, the distances of your throws. And then you are ranked nationally by how good you are. So you can see how you compare with other throwers all over the country. And that's usually what they look at when you're trying to qualify to attend to compete at these higher level games.
I see. So I'm assuming that the heavy athletics is similar to piping in that it's mostly for pretty much everybody. It is a passionate hobby that is also really expensive in both time and money. People are only doing it if they love it. But are there any instances of throwers having any kind of sponsorship, some of the top throwers?
There is actually a pro division, more on the men's side. On the women's side, they call it the elite division. There are some people who are actually able to make money off of it, although not much more than a part-time job from what we hear.
Yeah.
But for example, if you are an amateur and you're hitting really, really good marks consistently, then there are games that have pros come to compete, and you can contact them and have them invite you as a pro to come and throw. That's really cool. It's something that as soon as you start doing that, then you really can't compete as an amateur anymore. And so it limits how much you can do. So if you're not really good, if you do that, you can basically end your career because you can't go to the games around you anymore. But there are pros on the men's side. The women's side, it's just there are only a couple of games that really do that. And so I don't think you have to stop competing as an amateur on the women's side. You happen to go to those games and they'll pay you if you win.
I see.
And the nice thing about Scottish games is, yes, you have to buy a kilt. Yes, you have to pay the entry fee, which is usually, I don't know, $20 to $30. But as far as actually having to have all the equipment, people are very good about being resourceful and using what they have to try and simulate what a weight or picking up stones out of a river, welding different weight sets together on a chain with a handle. You don't necessarily have to go into debt to be a thrower. It's not that expensive when you're starting out.
I
You
see.
know, as you get better, you may want to purchase certain pieces of equipment to practice with in your backyard, but that's definitely not necessary as it would be, to buy a bagpipe.
Right, I
You
gotcha.
need to have a bagpipe to be a piper, right?
Right, yeah,
You
and
don't necessarily, you can just go find stones and weights and kind of,
Yeah.
fiddle your way around to become a thrower.
yeah. Yeah, so I've been playing pipes for like 15 or 16 years. I started when I was a teenager, and ever since I was a teenager, I've always been really interested in the athletics. I pretty rarely could go and watch them because I usually was getting ready for either a solo or a band competition. But watching them through the trees,
Yeah.
from the other side of the park.
Mm-hmm.
And I've always been interested in getting into it. I'm not a particularly big guy. I need to compete in featherweight or the similar.
Lightweight.
Yeah, the lightweight division. But I did recently join a Utah heavy athletics like Facebook group just to kind of see like
Mm-hmm.
how do we get into this? How do people train and stuff?
Hmm.
And honestly, the one that still blows my mind I don't understand is how on earth does a person learn or practice to toss a caber?
um, the answer to that one is you on that Facebook page. There's a guy named Joel Sims.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Basically, anybody who's doing Highland Games, I have yet to see an exception to this, is willing to have other people come and practice with them and learn about the sport. And there are groups, especially in northern Utah, that are really big into that. Joel has practices all the time in the spring and summer. Tyler Anderson also runs them. Joel is the king of cabers. He's really good at them. Frustrating leaks, I still compete against him on occasion.
Yeah.
And he generally teaches everybody in Utah how to throw cabers. But there's no way to really train for it except just to go out and try it.
Yeah, so what does he have a connection with like the telephone company and he gets down poles or something?
Actually, they're not telephone poles. Usually they are tree trunks. They look that big sometimes, but actually the weight of them is not the problem. It's the length of it that's the problem.
Mm-hmm.
Any of the A's that are out there, and most of everybody, the weight of those cabers wouldn't shock you. I mean, to pick up 100 pounds something for most of these guys is not a big deal. But when it's 100 pounds and it's 18 feet long,
Yeah.
and you're holding it mid chest, sticking up over your head, and you're supposed to, manage that and run with it and then throw it, that's difficult. And so it's arguably the most dangerous of the events, and it's definitely one with a really, really steep learning curve.
Yeah. So, what about the other events? Will you talk to me a little bit about, maybe tell me about what you have done in the past to sort of train and practice, and maybe also what that looks like for you right now while you're traveling? I'd imagine you probably can't do quite everything you usually do.
No. Usually, what you do, especially in Utah, because it's cold, like it is here, apparently,
Yeah.
usually in the off season, which is between October, November until about April of every year, you just hit the weights. Usually powerlifting, with some Olympic lifting tossed in there. So you do lots of squats, lots of deadlift, clean, snatches, overhead presses. And so I would spend, months just lifting as heavy as I could get using different programs throughout the winter. And then you come out the other side of the winter, hopefully stronger than you went in, hopefully not injured, and then you start throwing again in the spring.
Mm.
Chelsea, on the other hand, has never really had to do that because she's freaky strong and athletic. And
Just
so she
strong all
mostly
the
did.
time, huh?
I guess.
She is, yeah. And so she mostly did like CrossFit. She's a CrossFit queen. And so she would do that and could still do everything she needs to do, which is amazing because that's not how I can do it. Out here on the road, we brought some weights with us and we brought a number of the implements with us. And so we just work out every chance we can get. We do drills or throw whenever we can get there. Kind of depends on where we're staying. Because if we're in
Sure.
like an RV park, They don't want us throwing our hammers around.
Yeah,
No one
of
does.
course. Yeah.
We couldn't bring our caber, don't have heavy enough weights to really do heavy lifting. And so this will definitely be a year where I'm going to have to depend on skill, which for me is really scary. For Chelsea is just fine because we won't have that big off season where we can lift really heavy.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we get the question, or we encounter a lot of people who want to practice, all of these events before they actually sign up for a games. And, can you show me all the events? Can I try them all? I'm nervous. Like what? And usually what we tell them is just sign up as a newbie, as a
Yes.
novice for your first games and show up. You do not have to have any prior experience. And we will walk you through all 9 events. And I know that's nerve wracking for people because who wants to sign up for their first competition never having to have done any of the events?
Yeah, I mean,
People
there's
do it
usually at least a small crowd watching.
Oh,
exactly. But people do it all the time, and it really is the best way to get your feet wet. Because you don't have any implements to throw. I mean, other than maybe a stone in your backyard. So we always tell people just sign up as a novice for your first event. We will walk you through all 9 events. It is not awkward to show up to your first competition never having touched an implement before. And I know that's nerve wracking and hard for people, but people do it all the time.
yeah.
And
That's how we did it.
yeah, that's how we did it.
Yeah.
And you know what? You'll go through all 9 events and then you'll either love it and start purchasing implements and start finding people to practice with, or you'll go, you know what? This is not for me.
Yeah,
And then
you
you
never
don't
do.
have to
Yep.
have bought of anything, which
Yeah.
usually doesn't happen. Most novices that come out, you continually see over and over again as
Yeah.
they move up in the ranks. But the best way to get started is to just find a games that's close to you, sign up as a novice, and show up without a kilt. It's fine. Everyone does it.
So I don't think I'm the only one who like I think I'm probably speaking a thought that's in the back of at least some people's mind. The people who do heavy athletics might be at least physically a bit intimidating, and so to imagine that you're a group of friendly, happy folks who are just excited to bring novices in under your wing and invite everyone. I'm not saying it's surprising. I'm sure you're wonderful people, but it's a little bit like, oh really, like I don't have to be scared of these people.
Well, I can address that one, and there really is a good group of people. We've done competitions all the way across the country, and because we're really big people, if you have somebody who's just a jerk, we're probably going to drum them out of the sport.
Yeah, I got you.
And so that's not a big problem. I'm probably the biggest person on any given field,
Being 6'6",
being
and
6'6" and
300
way more than 300 pounds.
That 300 is the goal, right?
300-ish. But really, it's not about that. If you got somebody who's actually a jerk, I don't see that very often, and those we don't really let stay around very much. But instead, we're all there to help. We've all been there very recently. Everyone, I mean, the best of them, the best throwers out there, are the ones trying to help everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's all the time. Plus, you don't have to come out and be my size to throw. We mention a lightweight division, but it actually does exist. You can't be over 200 pounds to be in the lightweight division.
and 150 for women.
And 150 for women. And so the smaller people, still not small, but smaller people are competing. There's also classes for if you're over 40. It's called the master's class. Heck, there's classes
It's nice
for
of
over
them
50
to call
and over
it
60.
that, huh? Instead
Yes.
of saying the,
Yes.
It's not
The
it's
old-
not the old
the old
geezers
crowd.
class. It's the
No,
master's
no.
class. That's
The
nice.
masters.
Hey, I'll be in the master's class come July, and I will not be small. You're not going to call me old, but
Yeah. So you see all shapes, sizes, weights, ages out on a
Backgrounds.
Highland Games field. So you never have to think, oh, well, I don't bench this much, or I'm not this height, or I don't have experience. There is a group for you. And you know what? You can compete in the C class your whole career and be fine with that and never move up. And that is fine. And people enjoy that. And they relish in that. And that's fine. So don't think that you're ever not good enough or not enough, because there is a class for you and we welcome everybody.
Yeah, it has stood out to me as like, well, this could be a possible, like, if nothing else, just like a way to stay healthy. Kind of just think to yourself, well,
Oh, yeah.
I'll do a games next summer, so I'll work out during the winter to be ready for that.
Well, and we always talk about that when you leave high school or college, if you do stuff in college, it's kind of like what you were saying about being in the
Being
Yeah,
Piper.
piper. There we
right.
go.
If
Saying
you're
it.
in the marching band
How
or
do
the
you
drum
say it?
line or
Marching
something,
band.
you want to keep doing
Yeah,
something.
you want to keep doing stuff, and a lot of us are in it because we enjoy competition. We don't have to win all the time, but we still like to go and compete. And it's a reason to stay healthy. It's a reason to keep up and keep doing things. I remember when we actually found Scottish Games, we were doing long distance running.
Mm-hmm.
And we had actually signed up for and were training for a half marathon when we found Scottish Games. And because we'd already signed up for it, we kept doing the running while we're working on, our Scottish Games career starting.
Hmm.
And so, heck, the last games of that year, we actually went and did a half marathon, and then went to the games. We were half an hour late,
Oh man,
and so we were trying to make it as
You really
half
did love it.
marathoners.
Yeah, we were trying to find something
Yeah.
that we could still compete, still be healthy, have some type of motivation. And so, yeah, it's a great reason for people just to have something to do on a Saturday, have a goal to strive for. You do not have to win to have fun doing this.
And-
You can just have fun being on the field.
Are these heavy athletics, at least locally, is it 100% individual athletes, or is there any something like a track and field team where there would be a team score at the end of the day?
There are some team events. I don't think there are any in Utah. There are times when there's a team type event. They're not very popular, truth be told, because you don't really need that either. Anytime you're out on the field with Highland gamers, you compete when you're actually throwing. The rest of the time, you're sitting there. People are swapping, tips, saying, "Hey, you notice your foot didn't quite come around that way. Try this next time." And hey, I've been trying this. Have you tried that? And it's like you're sitting around joking with your teammates, but you happen to be competing at the same time.
And hey, you got a PR. That's personal
Oh, yeah.
record. Like, that's awesome. Can you take a video of me from this angle? Like, we're all there to be each other's coaches. So, yeah, we don't really need the team aspect. It's more just we have this huge support group where everyone wants everyone else to improve and do better than they did last time.
I see. Oh, it's very cool. So, are there ever any, albeit friendly, but still sort of rivalries that develop? That you're like, oh, let's watch these two this year. Let's see what they do this year.
Yes.
I imagine there would be.
The best time.
And how many of them are you two involved in?
Well, I think there's
I don't
definitely,
know.
since John and I had the background when we started, I'm sure there's, the Forsythes are here.
Yeah.
Because not to toot our own horns, but especially in Utah, we pretty much always walk away with a sword or a shield which are the trophies.
And that's honestly, that's one of the coolest things that really has always attracted me to it. I'm like, as a pipe band, I've got like a plate before, and I'm like, well, that's something, but I'd much rather get a sword.
Oh, you should have seen our garage. We've
It was beautiful.
We've had everything from double-bladed axes to you say them all. I don't even remember.
Yeah, multiple claymores, whole bunch of swords, axes, flails, daggers,
Spears,
helmets
with spikes on them.
which is always fun because Chelsea doesn't care at all about that stuff.
Oh,
I
really?
just want a gift card.
But then, she'll take first and I'll take second, and I go home with two new weapons. It's wonderful.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. She just handed it right
Our
to you in the
kids
car.
love it.
Yeah, kids love it. So that part is fun. There's a lot of rivalries, but again, I can remember one time there were 2 or 3 throwers in Utah that I was competing really closely with that year. And it was like the second or third year. And we were really, really close, and it was really good competition. And I can remember taking a picture of myself, like at a gym, not of myself, but of the gym, and posting it and saying, "Hey, for you 3, I outworked you today." And just, put that on. That was my social media post.
Uh-huh.
And they were all working out about the same time I was. And it was like, haha, you couldn't outwork me, that kind of stuff. And so there's lots of rivalries, not any that get really vicious or anything like that. It just pushes you to get better.
Sure, yeah.
And that was a lot of fun. Those years were some of my favorites.
So when we're talking about the events themselves, let's say we have somebody showing up for the first time ever. I think it's pretty clear that the caber toss is probably the biggest learning curve. Is there any one event that, in your experience, is probably like sort of the most natural for just about anybody to just kind of pick up and go?
No.
I would say probably weight over bar seems to be, as long as you, weight over bar is when you are competing for how high you can throw a weight. And so you get 3 attempts at each height over your head. So you swing the weight through your legs and up and over your head over the bar. And it seems like a lot of people, since you don't have to move your feet, you're not traveling anywhere. You're really just swinging a weight through your legs and up over your head, kind of
Oh,
like a kettlebell
and then
would.
trying to make sure it doesn't land on you, right? That's kind of
Yeah,
the
I was
key
going to
part at
say,
the
as
end.
long as you keep your eye on the weight
Yeah.
as it goes up and over your head, that's the hardest part of it. So people seem to pick that up pretty quick,
Yeah.
pretty
Especially if
naturally.
you're, because we get a lot of, strong men and power lifters and stuff like that. Especially if you're a little bit on the stronger side, beginners tend to do fairly well with that one.
Yeah.
So that's a good confidence boost maybe for a
Yeah,
beginner to.
As
yeah.
long as they survive, yeah.
Yeah, as
they're
long as it
good
doesn't
to,
hit them, right?
Yeah, I think the other one would probably be
Like a
both the
Braemar?
stones.
Yeah.
Um, there's 2 different stones that you throw. That one is light and one is heavy. The light one we call open stone, and you're able to do some type of movement as extra oomph behind it. So it would look like someone was throwing a shot put. Some people
Yeah.
spin, some people glide, some people shuffle. And as long as you aren't throwing it like you would a baseball and you're more pushing it like a shot put, that seems to, people seem to pick that one up pretty well. And then the heavy stone is called the Braemar stone. And that one you pretty
It's even
much
simpler.
just, even simpler. You just stand with your 2 feet, bend over, turn, and push the stone as far as you can. So those ones are a little more simple just because there isn't a lot of feet movement. You're really just working with a stone and a weight. So those would probably be the easier
Where
events
everything
at
else
first.
gets more complicated. So
Yeah. I've had the experience, having gone to games pretty much most of my life. It seems to me that like you would think the caber toss is probably the most popular for spectators, but it's that weight over bar. A lot of competitors hike their kilt up, on over one thigh, and that gets a lot of cheers.
Yeah, yeah,
I
it
think
does.
I think the kilt hike gets more cheers than actually throwing the weight.
Yeah, yeah. We've also seen men, take their shirts off in their kilts, and,
There
and
we
that
go.
always gets a few cheers too. But I think spectators definitely like watching the 2 height events. So that we've talked about weight over bar, or we can call it WOB. But the other one is sheaf,
That's with
SHEAF.
the
That's with the
pitchfork, right?
pitchfork. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that
And
one.
I think people like watching both of those events because people can immediately see whether it was successful.
Ah, yeah.
So you can see whether it went over the bar or not, or if it hit into the bar or not. Where when you're watching distance events, you're like, well, was that further than the last one? Or
Right.
what place are they
it
in?
could be a world record, and it looked a lot like all the other throws
Yeah,
from the
yeah.
stands, and so those are
Yeah.
a little bit harder.
Yeah, so I think definitely from what we've seen, the spectators love watching caber, of course, because that's like the ultimate. Let's run with a tree log and flip it over,
Right.
and the 2 height events seem to be the highlights of the games.
But between the weight over bar and the sheaf toss, which I'd imagine the sheaf, that's probably itself like that bundle is probably lighter than the weight itself. But which of these do you think is more accident prone?
Actually, I don't see, unless there's a failure in the equipment, you don't see very many accidents with the wob, with the weight over bar.
Yeah.
Part of it is because just without, I mean, for men, that's a 56-pound weight that you're trying to throw up over your head. You're watching that, and
Yeah, for
people
sure.
actually, run away from it more than they need to
It
in most
looks
cases.
a lot scarier watching it than doing it.
Oh, yeah.
Like when you're
I
watching it, you're like,
gasped
oh
quite
my
a bit.
gosh,
Yeah.
yeah, that's going to fall down right on his head.
Yeah.
It's like we can see it and we can step out of the way if it's
Yeah.
coming down directly on us.
And it doesn't go very far. I mean, it's like right there, so that's not usually a problem. Sheaf, on the other hand, has its problems because that bag, the bag for men for the A's is about 20 pounds. For women, it's between 12 and 10, depending on what the games wants to do. But that goes flying off every direction. You have people like me who throw it as if they're throwing it for distance too, and so
Yeah.
I throw it 50 feet behind the standard also.
Yeah.
And you have people on occasion who do stab themselves with their sharpened pitchforks
Right,
and
you're
have to go
adding
to the
that into the
hospital.
mix.
Yeah, we've seen a
We've
few
had
pitchforks
few
go
times.
through a few knees. So.
Which shouldn't
man.
happen. It's always an aberration. Something weird happened.
But still, it's happened.
It's
We
happened.
could probably share at least 5 or...
Yeah, it's happened.
Yeah, we know people we have never done it
We
ourselves.
haven't.
Yeah.
But yeah, so sheaf, hands down, is scarier for the athletes and for the crowd than wob is, even though you'd think wob would be, but people don't hit themselves with wob very often. Sheaf, bad things happen.
Yeah. Between the weight and
Which
the
makes
pointy
it fun.
stick.
Yes.
Yeah.
So stone, we've got the splits, the caber toss, and what else? The hammer throw.
You have the hammer throws, which are kind of like if you had a really heavy sledgehammer and you threw it over your left shoulder.
And is that what people practice with? They just get a sledgehammer and just go throw that
No.
around?
You actually practice with, to make it a little bit easier, I think on us, the handles we use are PVC. There's electrical conduit. Okay?
Yeah, I've seen it.
So
they,
that
they
they-
often kind of, they vibrate when they hit the ground and stuff, kind of
Yeah,
wobble.
they also break, which is why
Oh,
we
yeah.
use PVC. But for the men, you have heavy hammer and light hammer. Heavy hammer is 22 pounds at the end of that handle, and the light hammer is 16 pounds. For women, the heavy hammer is 16, and the light is 12. And so it's interesting because the hammer requires the most weird stuff to make it work well. First of all, we wear boots with blades sticking out of the ends of them.
Yeah, what is up? It's that. It's like you got sword shoes on.
Yeah, and I've got a funny story about that. But
Well, tell it
those
to me.
are I will. First, I'll tell you what they're for.
All right.
You're standing with your back to where you're going to be throwing. So you're literally throwing it up over your left shoulder if you're right-handed, or at least in that direction. The blades, you actually stick them down underneath the grass, like into the turf, so that you can lean backwards without falling over.
Yeah, I watch these
'Cause if
guys
you
do it,
can-
and sometimes they lean so far. I'm like, man, that's got to either
Oh,
feel
yeah.
really good or really bad.
Because if you can imagine that centripetal force of you swinging that hammer around your head 2
Yeah.
to 3 times before you release it, your feet are going to just flail right out from under you.
Yeah.
So that's why we have the blades to kind of stick our feet to the ground so that we can swing that hammer around without falling on our bums, which sometimes it still happens.
And it's funny to watch us because you can't walk normally with those on.
No, yeah.
And so we're still walking out to the field to pick up hammers and walking around talking to people. And so we all walk really funny, and on occasion we fall down because we forget that we're wearing those and we
You stick
dig
it
into
in
the
ground
turf
where
and we
you
almost fall
want
down. That, and I'll tell you the story, but we also have to have adhesive on our hands. Otherwise,
I've
we won't
seen
be able
that
to hold
sticky
on to the
stuff.
handles.
Yeah. Looks like
Oh,
you
yeah.
got honey out there.
Yeah.
It's worse than honey. It takes a lot
boy.
to get it off again. But that's so we can actually hold on, because the force is so great when that starts to move and you've got like 22 pounds at the end of this 50-inch long handle that you're trying to accelerate, you wouldn't be able to hold on to it, or at least
Yeah.
not very well. And so we put sticky stuff on our hands to hold on to the handle, blades to hook us into the ground, and it goes the farthest of any of the implements.
Yeah.
So it's huge. I've
Yeah.
thrown that into the crowd before, and that was fun.
Oh, boy.
So no, I missed. No one got hurt. But anyway, the story, the first time I ever put these blades onto my boots, for some reason I already pre-drilled the holes and everything like that, but I still needed to fasten them on. I was getting an oil change. And so I sat in a Jiffy Lube waiting room filled with people, sat there and attached these blades on the bottoms of these hiking boots.
Were people scooting away from you? Just like giving you
No,
sideways
that was the
looks?
funny part. 6'6", 300-pound guy attaching blades to
Right.
boots. Nobody made eye contact. Nobody said a thing.
Yeah, well, I guess that's
They were
the other
just-
defense mechanism, right?
Whatever you're doing over there, you just keep doing it. We don't care.
Yeah, you
But
carry on,
Don't
sir.
ask questions and pretend like it's
Nothing.
not happening.
it's just this is funny about human nature. No, whatever the giant's doing with his boots, just leave him
Just
alone.
let him do it.
Yeah, it's funny.
He's putting swords on his shoes. Yes, well.
Yeah.
Yes.
So those you strap them to some boots. Are these blades like what, like, where do you get these? What are these? Are they specialty for the sport, or is it like hedge clippers broken in half?
They're special. They're special for the sport, but they're not that special.
Yeah.
And they aren't necessary. It's just as you improve and get that hammer going faster, it's
They
kind of the
become
next
more
step.
so. Gotcha.
But I would say only a few of the B class and most of the A class have them. But
So,
it's not
so your novice
necessarily-
thrower isn't gonna have to show up
Your
with
novice
swords on
thrower's
their
not
shoes.
gonna.
No.
No. That's when you start to want to, go to some championships or win games. Then you start into that. But not everybody has.
And
them.
there's definitely, you can find people who sell them and make them and will ship them to you. They're pretty easy to find.
They're usually lawnmower blades that are just reshaped and
Gotcha.
sharpened.
Interesting.
And they're not that sharp. They dig into the dirt, for heaven's sake. So
Yeah. If they were sharp, they wouldn't stay that way for long.
Yeah.
no, they don't.
Now, I watched I watched a really cool series of sort of documentaries about people who pick stones up all over the world. They did like one on Iceland and one in Spain, and then they did one on Scotland. And there are these famous stones that are like in churchyards or all over the country that they usually put like these ring handles in them, and then you just kind of straddle
Talking
them and
about-
see if you can pick them up.
That's the Denny stones.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Is that ever part of the games?
Kind of. The Denny stones obviously don't travel much.
No, sure. I'm sure they don't.
But there's a lot of crossover between that and us. There's a guy in Utah named Ryan Stewart, who's our only pro out of Utah, and he's since retired from the throwing, but he's went really big into the stone lifting. And there's actually a documentary coming out soon about the ones he's doing here in Utah. So there's a lot of crossover there. Often at games there'll be an extra event that's just a crowd pleaser. That's just for the fun of it. And so
Yeah.
you have the 9 typical ones, but sometimes there's an extra
lift
one.
this stone over here, or lift
Yeah.
these stones with handles and walk with them,
Yeah.
or lift this stone up to your shoulder and we'll see how long you can hold it. I think people who've been doing this sport for so many years, I think they're just trying to find another way to challenge us, another way to make it exciting, something new. Sometimes there's a cash prize attached to it, that type of thing.
So that adds some variety for the competitors
definitely.
more than the
Yeah.
crowd, probably.
Yeah.
But the natural stone lifting, as John said, is definitely a big crossover for these heavy athletics crowd. And I guess it all dates back to stones that have been in England and Scotland, and like John said, Ryan Stewart has created a whole Facebook group. And
Is that the Utah Stones of Strength? Is that what they're
Yes.
called?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
That's
I've got a lot of aspirations. I'm in that group too, though I can't pick anything up. But
Awesome.
I
He would
like
be
seeing other
another-
people do it.
He'd be another fantastic one to interview.
Yeah.
If you can get a hold of him. But he's created a whole Utah stones all over, and you can get the different GPSs for these different stones, and he's named them and has a story behind them. And they relate back to ancient stones, and you can go around and lift these stones and take video of yourself doing it and post it to this Facebook group. And it's really cool.
That's
For
super cool.
for example, though, probably the best example of that in Utah is at Payson. There are the Payson stones that are similar to the Denny stones. The Denny stones are in Scotland, and they're 700 plus pounds in between 2 boulders. You straddle them and you pick them up, holding onto rings. I want to do that someday. The Payson stones are a little bit over 500 pounds. Again, 2 boulders. The boulders are different weights, different heights. The rings are slightly different in the Denny stones, pretty similar in the Payson stones, though. But at the end of the Payson games, the end of the strongman competition at Payson games, and then at the Highland games, the challenge with the Payson stones is to pick them up and carry them as far as you can.
Ah, yeah.
And they are awful.
How
they're
far
just
do you
awful.
know off the top of your head how far you've made it with them?
Yes, because it's a sore point.
It's a small number, so it's easy to remember.
Yeah. Well, the long-standing record is a little bit over 76 feet, and the little bit over is the hard part. The first time I ever picked them up, I made it 72 feet and
Oh,
change.
you were right there. You were right.
I was right there
man.
before I had my hand half ripped off, and I had to drop them. And then the next time I had a chance to do it, remembered that, and that's the problem, is I went with my memory. I remembered that the record was 76. And so I set up cones at 76 feet
Yeah.
and carried them 76 feet and like 2 inches. And turns out the record was like 76 feet 9 inches.
Oh no.
And so I missed it by that far the last time I tried them, and they're awful. I mean,
Yeah.
you want to
can't
drop
do it
them
again.
after.
It's not like, oh, well,
No.
let me try
Yeah,
again.
give it
No,
another
it's
try.
like one and done. Maybe I'll do it again in a year.
Yeah, you
type
got to
of
go
But I
ice your
could have made it
forearms
another
after
7
that.
inches if I'd thought that. But yeah, those are brutal. So if you have a
Yeah.
chance to watch people try that, most people, you want to drop it after 2 feet. And so it's
You're
just
Yeah.
banging into your
Oh.
shins as you're walking, and each one they're spinning, and
the
yeah,
left one
it's-
spins like almost continually.
Is
and
that
so
by
you have to-
design, or is it
No.
just an
If I went
unhappy
too far, it would
circumstance?
literally like spin the handle out of the stone.
Yeah.
So no, it's just, they're just awful. I love them, but they're awful. They're painful. So stuff like that does happen. It's just as an extra event at the end of the day, and yeah, a whole bunch of things like that happen. It's a fun sport.
Yeah. Now, what about kilts? Do you guys do you guys get a special? You know, are you wearing like a I don't know what kind of material it'd be made of, but is there some sort of special sporting kilt that would be different than like a kilt that a piper would wear?
It's funny that you said sporting kilts, because that's exactly what it's called. It's called sport kilts.
Yeah.
And that's usually where everyone purchases theirs. Because obviously, when you're a piper, you're getting, lots of yardage, lots of pleats, big heavy material, quality. You don't necessarily want to throw in that.
Yeah,
Sweat,
I mean,
throw,
I look at
sit
that and I
on.
think I don't want my kilt anywhere near an athlete. You know,
Imagine
Exactly.
the sweat, the chalk from throwing,
Yeah,
the
the chalk.
adhesives,
Hands,
rocks
yeah.
getting it all pilly
scraping
and
it on the
stuff.
cabers.
So-
Sometimes people will catch them with the sheaf forks and rip their kilt all the way off on the
because
way
they're
up
Velcro.
because they're velcroed
Oh
on.
yeah,
Yeah.
of course.
Yeah, so the best way is you just look up the original sportkilt.com, and you can find the kilts on there. They just do it by, small, medium, large, extra large. They're definitely adjustable because they are Velcro, and the nice thing is they're made to just be athletic
active.
in the kilt, be active in those kilts.
And it sounds
So-
like good advice. Wear shorts underneath your kilt.
Yes.
Yeah, definitely.
We get the question all the time. What do you wear under those?
Spandex.
Yeah, but people are just trying to tease us.
Yeah. Yeah, perfect. Well, what other did we miss any of the 9 standard events?
You're missing the
yeah.
weight throw, which
What's that one like?
that's the man maker. For men, the weight throw is the one that, I mean, you'll be embarrassed by other things. The weight throw will humble you. For men, it's a 56-pound weight. You hold it in one hand. You spin around twice and throw it as far as you can, hoping that doesn't throw you farther than you throw it.
Oh yeah.
Because at 56 pounds, it does interesting things. So that's the heavy. The light is half that weight at 28 pounds. For women, the heavy is 28 and their light is 14. But that one, for example, to be like pro level in heavyweight for distance is about 40 feet, which is ridiculously short. Our trailer is longer than that
Yeah.
that we're living in
This
right
is a
now.
lot of weight.
And I've never hit 40 feet with it. It's mocking me. But that one's really, really heavy. You actually tape up your hand to try and keep your calluses from ripping off when you throw that one. The first time I ever threw that, I remember that first day, that first Saturday, I threw that and ended up right on the back looking at the judge. But I think I fouled that one. He said, "Yeah, I think you did." It's a lot of fun. It's typically, if you win the heavyweight for distance, you have a good shot at winning the competition overall. I'm not sure why that is. It's probably psychological. But it's the one where, if you've got the best form, you've got the most strength, you can win the heavyweight for distance, it's a big feather in your cap.
But I think the big part of that has to do with, it's probably the most intricate in footwork. You're spinning 2 times around before you actually release the weight for distance. And as long as you can stay low and counterbalance, then you can get a good throw. But you can imagine how many people fall on their butts and, roll an ankle or get out of the trig. You don't stay in like the box that you're supposed to stay
Oh
in.
yeah.
So it's definitely probably the most out of control, um, and can go
It's
the most wrong.
it's the
Maybe.
most unforgiving. Most
Mm.
other things you can mess up a little bit and be okay. Heavyweight, you're just toast.
Mm.
And I've fallen down more times with that. It's you just have to laugh at some of them, but that's the hardest one. I would
Gotcha.
say by physically taxing, I'd rather throw caber than throw heavyweight for distance.
Really interesting. I would have thought caber would be the most difficult of them all.
No, not in my
Caber takes more
experience.
finesse.
Sure.
Caber takes a lot of finesse, but like heavyweight, you have to have finesse, but you also have to be. It's just so heavy.
Yeah, you got to have strength and finesse all at the same time. Huh?
56 pounds in one hand. It's just
Mm.
like you've got to be kidding me.
Yeah.
I'd rather throw it than walk with it.
Yeah. So I know that like with piping, we see that like if a new person's coming to piping for the first time, if they and I don't want this to seem like a bar for entry. It sounds to me like anybody who is interested should try this, whether they've done other sports before or not. But I am curious because with piping, I see that like people who have played clarinet, for example, before usually take to piping very quickly and easily. Is it track and field, or are there any other sports that kind of seem to feed very naturally into Highland games or the heavy athletics? I mean.
I would say definitely, if you ask throwers who are successful in Highland Games, most of them have uh, track and field in their background.
Yeah, makes sense.
Um, Other than that, I mean, it's not like, oh, I was a volleyball player and now I'm great at Highland Games. Like,
Right, right.
it doesn't really correlate. So I think the only parallel that you can draw is throwing in track and field. Other than that, I mean, if you're athletic, it's definitely going to help. If you are a football player and have been in the weight room before, that's definitely going to help. But throwing in track and field is the closest parallel.
Makes sense.
If you haven't done track and field, then what you end up with are strong men and power lifters, the stronger people who are still athletic. And
Mm-hmm.
the really good ones are the ones who can be explosive and still really strong. So
Gotcha.
Or just people who love wearing a kilt and love Scotland and want to be out on the field doing something
Yeah.
and have no athletic background or no weightlifting experience and just want something to do on a Saturday. We get those too.
Yeah. So I'm curious to what degree does your yell affect your distance? Because it seems to me that there must be a correlation there, just from the distance and all the yelling that I hear.
You would think so after hearing some people yell, but
in hammer, it's required.
It's required, huh?
Can't have a good throwing hammer without a yell.
Yeah.
In weights, it's more like oh no.
It's more an oh no yell.
But hammer, you can yell pretty good.
and in sheaf it's probably like a phew, I didn't stab myself in the
Right.
knee.
A relief. So
Yeah.
it has seemed to me that like I don't think I'm the only piper or drummer who's been interested in trying Highland Games, but what I thought was a limiting factor before was basically that on the day of a Scottish festival where there are bagpipe band competitions happening, I wouldn't have time to go back and forth, especially if I was changing my kilt and stuff. I hadn't realized that there are other games happening for heavy athletics aside from the few a year that there's a pipe band competing at.
Oh, definitely. Pre-COVID,
Pre-COVID, stupid thing.
there would be anywhere from, I would say, the big events. There's probably two or three where there would be pipe bands.
Mm-hmm.
But other than that, there's at least 5 to 6 or 7 other small backyard games that we don't have pipers or a big festival going on.
So if pipers and drummers want to do this, could totally do it. Just come to the backyard games.
Yep. So obviously, if you're in Utah, you're going to look up UtahHeavyAthletics.com and you can look up the schedule, and you'll see right on there where the events are happening.
And at any given time, any given weekend in the United States, there's several games going in the spring and summer. So it also depends on where you are, because, yeah, you could go to 2 or 3 every weekend if you wanted to. It just depends on where you are in the nation at the time.
Yeah. So it seems to me that like sort of a one bar for entry for at least a perceived bar for entry for people is how do you even start? Who do you talk to? So people ought to just Google it, hop on Facebook, look around, or go to an event and maybe just walk up to any athlete and be like, I want to try this.
The best way is go on Facebook to Utah Heavy Athletics. Join up in that group, and then find the games that has a novice class and show up.
Yeah.
Because waiting and coming to talk to us, we're going to tell you you should be throwing this. Come on out and take a look. So yeah, better just find the games and come on out.
If you're outside of Utah, you can either look on the website that we talked previously, the NASGA web.com or .org or something like that. But look that up, and they have a list of games that are going on. Or yeah, if you see a Scottish Games going on, pull over, go and talk to an athlete. We're always happy to talk to the crowd. It's not distracting, or we're just waiting for our turn. In fact, it's complimentary when people come and ask us questions and how to get into it and how to do it, and any questions really. But yeah, there is a Scottish Games going on somewhere close to you at some time of the year. You will find an athletic event.
And no need to feel intimidated. If you're interested, you gotta try to hop in there.
Exactly.
Again, if you find a jerk that's throwing Highland Games, know it's an exception.
Yeah, gotcha.
And that their buddies are going to try to correct that particular problem. Because we're there for the fans. We are entertainment. We're there to compete, but we're also there for, and we love having people. That was the worst part about COVID, is we lost most of our audience.
Yeah.
And so we're there to compete, but we're also there to have a good time and to put on a good show.
We love interacting with people. It's so much fun, and hearing their why and their Scottish ancestry, and why they're there and why they love Scotland, and we've heard it all.
Yeah.
So yeah, if you find a jerk, it's an exception, and you should just go on to the next person. That person was having a bad day for some weird reason.
Yeah.
They only managed to carry the Pace and Stone 76 feet and 4 inches or something like that, right?
Probably. Yeah.
Even I would still be nice after that.
I bet you would. Yeah, I don't doubt it.
Tired, but nice.
Yeah, tired and trying to put some ice on your wrist, but still nice.
Oh gosh.
So in kind of wrapping up, do either of you have any favorite event, history of an event, or a favorite story that you'd be interested in sharing?
What you got, Mama?
Well, I one thing I love about the Payson Games, it's probably both of our favorites every year, but one great thing about it is it's the Utah Caber Championship. So after all 9 events are done, then what they do is they take the top caber throwers in each group, and they put us all head to head. And they start with the smallest caber, and if you can flip it, then you keep moving up to the next and the next and the next. And I love that every year, because I feel like it's just, all right, true grit right here. Let's all put everything down. We're all tired. We're all hot and sweaty, but we've got one more thing to do. And one year I was just so spent. I was tired. I was hot. And I was going into this caber championship. And, I flipped the first few okay as some of the girls were dropping off. And I kept going, caber after caber. And at that point, I was having some of the men joining in and throwing the cabers as well. And I remember first I tried this huge caber, and each caber has a different score, depending on their weight, their length, their balance point. And this was a 400-point caber, if I'm remembering it right. And I tried it the first time. You got 2 attempts on each one, and it just was not going over. So I knew that I had one more try. There was this huge crowd cheering me on. They were all clapping in turn, and I just started running as fast as I could. And you've never seen a caber turn over more slowly. Like it hit its tip, and it was just like,
just standing still for a minute.
Yeah, standing straight up, and I wanted to run up and push it over.
Yeah.
But darn, that huge caber turned over, and it was huge. It was probably one of the bigger cabers that's ever been turned by a woman in Utah.
Awesome.
And the crowd was cheering, and it was just a great cherry on top of a great day. And I've always loved cabers, and I just think it's a fun event to be running with a big log and try and flip it end over end.
Yeah,
And
it's such a wild competition to have
it
cooked
really
up.
is. It
And that's
really is.
impressive either way. But was this one of the years that you were competing 6 months pregnant?
It might have not been. It probably was a year
Impressive
that I
either
was
way.
an
Still
off year.
impressive. Yeah,
It's
impressive either
probably an
way.
off year.
Baby was probably 6 months old at the
Yeah,
time.
there you go.
That's how that one goes.
Do you have a story?
My story isn't nearly as exciting as yours, but it kind of illustrates what I like about Scottish games. There's games back in Minnesota that I went to in 2017 where it was interesting because about halfway through the day you've done most of the distance events, and at that point I'd only won one event so far. So I'd been like second or third, or I was first in one event, which again was the heavyweight for distance. Still didn't hit the stupid 40 feet mark, but I'd won that one event. And there was a guy there that, good friend of mine, that was supposed to win the whole thing. He was really highly ranked. He was a really good thrower. And to be sarcastic, I was sitting there, we took a break for lunch, and I said, well, whoever's in first should go first on, I think it was the caber toss was coming up next. They were trying to decide who was going to go first. And said, well, let whoever's in first do it. And this guy turned to me and said, that's you. I said, what? Because I hadn't even checked. I figured I was, I'd been getting
Figured it
second
was
and
him,
third, so I
right?
was
Yeah.
third, fourth, something like that. And I said, really? He said, yeah. And went over and checked the scores, and I was ahead of him by like 2 points.
Mm.
And I went on to win that day. But the funny part about it was I still only won the one event out of 9. Well, actually in that game it was 7 the entire day. But I was more consistent than he was. He had a bad event, and I had only one that I even won the thing. But because I was more consistent through the day,
Yeah.
I won, which was fun because it means you don't have to actually come out and beat everybody at each of their specialized events.
Yeah.
I couldn't beat him in hammers, for example. He's way too good at hammers. I wasn't going to come close. But I could be more consistent throughout the day and end up winning that one. And that was fun.
And John is being way too humble, not telling the rest of the story. That was the amateur world championship that he won in 2017.
Hey, all right, John.
Yes, it was.
Awesome. So I mean, but like that, honestly, like as a person here, for me personally, who's like interested in trying this, that does lower the bar for entry a little bit for me, because it's like, well, I feel like I have to be an expert in 9 sports in order to go and try this, But to suggest like, no, you can kind of hold your ground in all of them decently, you actually have a chance.
Yep. And that's the thing is some days you do better in some events and worse in others, and some days you do awful in all of them, but it really just depends on who you're going against that day and how they're doing. And so with 9 events, you really never know how it's going to turn out in the end. But that's part of the fun. One main reason why I love Scottish games is I can prove to my kids that it's not all about their Saturday soccer games and their activities, that mom and dad can make goals too, and that we can work towards those goals and sometimes win and sometimes lose and walk away with nothing. And I love showing that women are strong too, and that we can be successful and have a good time doing it. So if you want to follow any of our other adventures, we are on Instagram as 8, like the number 8, Kilted Travelers. We'll be getting all of our matching kilts soon, so that will be fun.
And it is the numerical number 8,
Yes,
Kilted
the number
Travelers.
8.
Okay.
Yeah, 6 kids, and John and I make 8. So 8 Kilted Travelers. And we currently, like we said, we're traveling around the country, and hopefully we'll be able to hit as many Scottish games as are open this year.
Yeah.
That's kind of the goal, to see what Scottish games we can find as we're traveling around and hopefully join in on. We also have some videos on YouTube. Our YouTube account is called Kilted Beauty and the Beast.
Perfect.
And you can look that up, and we actually have quite a few Highland game videos on there. that you can go and check out. And we even have a video on how to join in the Highland Games.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, excellent. I will find that and put a direct link to it in the
Perfect.
show notes for sure.
Great.
Yes.
And
Okay. When it comes to the Highland Games, it's really something that you have to come out and try at least once. Most of us, we tried it once, we got hooked, we're still doing it. But you don't have to be the biggest athlete in the world. You don't have to be Scottish. That's an important point to toss out there. You just have to love competing and want to come out and try something new and then just get into the community. We have people who don't even throw anymore. They've retired from throwing. It was too hard on them, or they had an injury or a knee replacement or something like that. But they're still helping. They're still in that community. We make lifelong friends that are just a lot of fun. And it's something you should come out and try. If you've ever thought about it, the way to do that, go on Facebook, Utah Heavy Athletics, or go online, utahheavyathletics.com, and start talking to people and make a plan to come out and try games. You won't be sorry that you did. It'll be an awesome Saturday. If you don't do it forever, that's fine, but it'll be worth a shot.